G'day, it's Coach Pete from Ascension. On this Whiteboard Wednesday, we're going to discuss the body's muscle fibre types. Now, our body has three broad categories of muscles. The one we're more familiar with, or think about the most when we talk about muscles, is skeletal muscle. That is the muscle that uses energy to move our bones to generate movement. The other two types of muscles, though, out there is smooth muscle, which is the muscle used in a lot of our body's organs, and cardiac muscle. Now, cardiac muscle is a special type of muscle that is only found in our heart. We're going to focus our time looking at skeletal muscle because that's what matters to us most when we generally think about training. Now, our muscle fibre types when it comes to skeletal muscle are broken down into two categories. We have type 1 fibres and type 2 fibres. There are differences between the two muscle fibre types that are really important to understand when it comes to training so we can design and implement training that leads to training the right type of muscle fibre using a certain energy system that leads to our improvements in specific aspects of performance or fitness. The way we break our muscle fibres down is by the size and speed of contraction they can actually generate. So we have what are known as slow twitch or type 1 muscle fibres and then fast twitch or type 2 muscle fibres. These muscle fibres look different, are different sizes, and these muscle fibres are also different in colour. You'll see type 1 muscle fibres are actually more red and type 2 muscle fibres are more white. Now, muscles don't have just one type of muscle fibre in them. They'll have a mixture of both type 1 and type 2 muscle fibres. Because of different colours, they then have a stripy or striated appearance. And that's why skeletal muscles are sometimes called striated muscles, because they appear stripy. Now let's have a good look at our type 1 muscle fibres. So our type 1 muscle fibres are really the long-term workhorses of our muscles. They're small, can only generate a slower and smaller contraction, but are built for long-term endurance, have a greater amount of capillaries, more hemoglobin, and then use the aerobic energy system. They're able to maintain our normal movement under low intensity. Now, looking at the type 2 muscle fibres, it's actually broken into three subtypes. A lot of the time, people only talk about two subtypes, but there's actually three. And what we have with the type 2 muscle fibres is a continuum. It's an escalation in their actual size, a change in their energy system use, and also the magnitude of their contraction. The first subtype of type 2 muscle fibres is the type 2A. And these are also known as fast oxidative glycotic. Now, type 1 muscle fibres are known as slow oxidative because they're slow twitch and they use the aerobic system. Type 2A fibres are also known as fast because they're a fast twitch muscle, oxidative because they can use the oxidative energy system, which is another name for the aerobic energy system, and glycotic of course is another name for the lactic energy system. We have a fast twitch muscle fibre that can draw on energy both from the aerobic and anaerobic energy systems. Now, these are larger than the type 1 muscle fibres, but they're not as large as the other types of type 2 muscle fibres. It's sort of a compromise. Moving on, we have the type 2X. This is a more recently identified and named muscle fibre. It fits in between our type 2A and our type 2B muscle fibres. So before we talk about type 2X, I'm going to jump ahead and talk about type 2B muscle fibres. Now, type 2B muscle fibres are our body's largest muscle fibres. These have the fastest contraction, generate the largest amount of force and power. They're known as fast glycotic. The reason why they're known as fast glycotic is because they're fast twitch and they utilize the anaerobic energy system. They're also the easiest to fatigue and the slowest to recover. In between the type 2A, our fast oxidative glycotic, and the type 2B, our fast glycotic, is the type 2X. Just how the type 2A is sort of halfway between a type 1 and a type 2 muscle fibre in a way, our type 2X muscle fibre sits smack bang in the middle between our type 2A and type 2B. They're larger than type 2As, but not as large as type 2Bs. They can generate a larger force than a type 2A, but not as large as a type 2B. They have less endurance than a type 2A, but they have more endurance than a type 2B. Now, looking at how these muscle fibres work in conjunction with each other, what we see is a continuum in terms of smaller muscle fibres on one side, building up to larger muscle fibres at the other side of the continuum. What we see on the same continuum, however, is smaller muscle fibres have greater endurance and rely on the aerobic energy system, moving over to larger muscle fibres that utilize the anaerobic energy system and have very low endurance. Our muscle fibers are used in conjunction with each other to generate larger and different amounts of force. Now, type 1 muscle fibers are always going to be activated with really low intensity movement. As the amount of force required to move, and whether that's moving normally, moving fast, just running, moving into sprinting, or lifting a heavier and heavier weight, what our body does is it recruits more and more muscle fibers. Initially, it'll recruit the type 1 muscle fibers as our sustained workhorses, but there's a point where our type 1 muscle fibers can't generate enough force to do the movement we require our body to do. And then it'll start recruiting type 2A muscle fibers. If that's done enough, it'll start looking at type 2B muscle fibers. It'll recruit all those muscle fibers. Having a mixture of muscle fibers in our body means that our muscles are able to maintain work at differing levels of intensity. Whilst our type 2 muscle fibers will generate larger forces and then will fatigue, we're still capable of some movement utilizing the type 1 muscle fibers, relying on the aerobic energy system. Now, it's not going to be as fast, as powerful, but it's still something. In terms of endurance, we see our type 1 muscle fibers work for hours. It's because they utilize the aerobic energy system. When we look at the type 2A muscle fibers, they're really working in that anaerobic endurance area. They have less endurance than what our type 1 muscle fibers. After 30 minutes, they're pretty much cooked. So our type 2A muscle fibers are really built for long-term anaerobic work. When it comes to anaerobic, that's going to be 30 minutes or less. We can't sustain complete anaerobic energy use, and we need the aerobic energy system to provide that baseline to keep the muscles working, but it allows us to increase intensity. It allows us to increase our energy output and generate a little bit more force and a little bit more power in short peaks throughout that 30 minutes. Moving on to the type 2X muscle fibers. Now, type 2X muscle fibers are really getting into that short-term anaerobic work, less than 5 minutes, or the glycotic anaerobic energy system. They're going to fatigue pretty fast, but not quite as fast. So they're still doing some large, powerful contractions, just not for a very long time. Lastly, we'll look at the type 2B muscle fibers. Now, these are the ones that are generating our maximum force, our maximum power. They're using that ATP-PC system. They're going to be expended and they're going to be fatigued within a minute. They're going to use a little bit of the anaerobic lactic acid energy system as well, but in reality, they're only good for short, fast, hard bursts before they're fatigued. If we understand how muscle fibers work and how the energy systems work, we can design our training that's appropriate. So if we're looking to develop maximal strength, the main muscle fibers we're trying to develop really are going to be our type 2 muscle fibers. It's going to be a little bit of the type 2A, a lot more of the type 2X, and all of our type 2B muscle fibers. Because we know they're larger, their duration is short term, that is less than a minute, and they're anaerobic, our training should be aligned to suit our outcome. There's no point doing long-term endurance work when we're trying to develop maximal strength. What we need to do is have training that allows our energy systems to recover, to fuel our muscles, to improve in the aspect of performance we want them to. So strength training, we're going to have larger amounts of rest to allow that anaerobic energy system to fully recover, or at least partially recover, so it can generate large contractions the next time. Understanding the size, the contraction, speed, and also the fatigue and endurance of our muscle fiber types allows us to design effective training based on those muscle fibers and the relevant energy systems they utilize. And there are some misconceptions, however, about what type of training is appropriate for what outcomes. And a common misconception is, okay, well, type 1 muscle fibers are built for endurance. There's no point in me doing strength training if I want to improve my long distance run time. And that's not the case at all. And it seems counterintuitive. It's because the benefits of resistance training aren't just on our muscle fibers. It also develops our connective tissue and our nervous system. It's going to make our joints more stable, less prone to injury, therefore lower injuries will occur. It also means we can generate short bursts of acceleration if needed with our type 2 muscle fibers, because they're the only ones that are really giving us the ability to accelerate up to faster speeds. That might mean a 100-meter sprint right at the end of an 800 or even a 5-kilometer race to win. There are some benefits of training aspects of different muscle fibers if we know what outcomes specifically we want to work on. Thanks for listening to this Whiteboard Wednesday. Don't forget to check out our website at www.ascensionbarbell.com. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube.